2022. Time is now 8 a.m. I'll call this special board meeting to order. The first on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
So moved. Do we have a second? Second by Laurel. A motion by Joe Cassiopo. Do we have any board discussion? Any public comment about the adoption of the agenda? Any online?
No public comment, Mr. Varner.
Okay. I'll now call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition say nay. Motion carries. Now we'll move into the flag salute. It'll be Lupe Ramirez. Would you please lead us?
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This special board meeting today is being held to allow us to conduct 3 interviews for potential superintendent candidates. First will be Mr. Andrew Fueling. That'll be from 8 to 9:30. Then Dr. John Goldhart from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. And then Dr. Jennifer Ward DeJoseph. It'll start at 1:30 and it'll go until 3 p.m. I want to let members of the public know that we are not going to take any public comment today. Public comment will be taken at the end of the meeting, which will be concluded tomorrow. We'll recess this meeting today at 3 o'clock, then call it back to order at 8 a.m. in the morning. And at the end of that meeting tomorrow is when public comment will be taken. Our first interview this morning is Mr. A.J. Fueling.
Mr. President, just a point of order. Is there a way to make the volume a little bit louder? I could barely hear what you're saying.
Raymond, can we turn up the volume? All right, I guess, is that better? Can you hear me better now? Okay.
President Varner, Mr. Fueling has been added to the meeting.
I couldn't hear what you said, I'm sorry.
Mr. Fueling has been admitted to the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Is he coming up on the screen?
Mr. President,
You know, I did want to read a statement before we start the interview, which I was reminded I needed to read. And this is a statement from Mrs. Stacy Wilkie McCulloch. She writes, I acknowledge that one of my comments at the last board meeting has been viewed as hurtful, and I am sincerely sorry to any hurt caused. I will be recusing myself from taking part in the superintendent interviews. I also took immediate actions when this matter was brought to my attention to educate myself so this will not happen again. So Mrs. Stacy Wilkie will be not participating in the superintendent interviews. Now we'll move on to Mr. Fueling. Good morning, Mr. Fueling.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Can you hear us okay?
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Can everybody hear all right? Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Fueling, I'm Richard Varner, President of the School Board of Trustees. On behalf of the board, I want to thank you for your interest in serving as a superintendent of the Carson City School District. It's not only our vision, but our purpose to inspire and empower innovators, leaders, and thinkers by providing a quality education to all students. We are pleased to have you with us today so we may get to know you. I'd like to introduce the members of the panel, and I'll start to my immediate right, Mrs. Laurel Crossman.
Good morning.
Next to Laurel is Mr. Mike Walker.
Morning, AJ.
And to my immediate left is Mrs. Lupe Ramirez.
Good morning, Mr. Fueling.
And then we have Mr. Joe Cassiopo,
Good morning.
and then Mr. Don Creighton.
Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Green.
I want to briefly go over what we're going to do today. The interview will last approximately 75 to 90 minutes, and this includes a period of time for you to ask questions of us at the end of the interview, after we ask our questions. The board has decided on 10 questions that we're going to ask you. We'll take turns asking questions, and this will include myself. I'll be asking some of the questions. And then what we'll do is go into, like I said, you'll be able to ask us questions at the end of it. And we have received some material that you've provided us. Thank you for providing that. It'll help us get to know you better. We appreciate it. And at that point, what I'd like to do is ask you to go ahead and introduce yourself. Now, a lot of us already know you, and a lot of the members of the community may already know you, but please introduce yourself again. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Varner, and good morning, everyone. So I'll introduce maybe some things you don't know about me, and hopefully it'll be of some interest. So as when I had my first interview with the district back in spring of 2014, I started it the same way. I was born and raised in God's country, which is Cudahy, Wisconsin. If you were from Wisconsin or southeastern Wisconsin, you likely would be laughing right now. Not exactly maybe how you picture God's country. It's a working class town. At my church here in town, I go to St. Peter's here in town. I ran into a gentleman there. There's a gentleman who goes there, parishioner, who's about 40 years older than me, and he's from South Milwaukee. South Milwaukee is the big rival from Cudahy. And to give you an idea of kind of the perception of the town, the first thing he said to me when I said I was from Cudahy, he said, "Oh, South Milwaukee, Whitefish Bay, nothing smells like Cudahy." And it's kind of crazy that little thing that everyone in southeastern Wisconsin is familiar with, and so it's been around for a really long time. It's a factory town, 2 big factories. There's a leather tannery, so that's kind of the smell that everybody knew of. There's bars on every corner. My elementary school was near the factories. And actually, they're the airport, the main airport in Milwaukee. General Mitchell is right next to the city of Cudahy. So in my elementary school, we often would have to pause when airplanes were flying over, and it was just kind of a normal part of what happened. You'd be in the middle of an instruction, and you stopped for 30 seconds because there was a plane, and then you'd start up again. One of the factories has this enormous hammer that would, I don't know if it was like every hour or what it was, but it would just pound, and it would shake the whole community. So my school would be shaking during the day. So not the optimal environment that I think we all hope for our kids, but it's definitely a place that can put a chip on your shoulder, I think, growing up. So, but a good place with good people nonetheless. I'm actually an only child. I don't think any of you know that about me. I was raised by my mom and grandmother back in Cudahy. School was always really important to them. I had some amazing teachers. Just to note a couple, because they may not get the props for this anymore, but my first grade teacher, Mildred Sven, big hugs, and I still send Christmas cards to her. She sends Christmas cards to me. She's 90 years old. Lived living in rural Wisconsin. Isla Manthe, who is my fifth grade teacher and got me to be obsessively interested in the world around me, the globe, cultures, other countries. Mr. Plath, my pre-calc teacher, who was a young guy and made me realize that it was okay to be really good at math and you could like it and you could still love 90s grunge music, which I thought was a pretty cool thing when I was in high school. And Mr. Ed LeFleur, who he's passed away, but he was my German teacher. I didn't actually learn a lot of German, but he was a bit of a kind of the most interesting, like the character on the commercials. He's like the most interesting man, a bit of a philosopher and bibliophile, just always reading books. And so it's just some really good experiences, even back in Cudahy. So I wanted to escape Cudahy and go somewhere more exotic. So after I graduated high school, I went to college in Des Moines, Iowa, which is usually where people go when they're looking for something exotic. And initially, my goal was to go out and make as much money as possible. I wanted to be a stockbroker. I had seen the movie Wall Street, and I was going to move to New York, and that was going to be my life. And fortunately, when I was in college, I did a semester abroad, had the opportunity to do a semester abroad in Australia, and truly just changed my life and my outlook and what I valued and priorities. So came back and finished up my program there, but then went back to school to become a teacher soon thereafter. Started teaching in East Troy, Wisconsin. And actually, the first year I started teaching, I met my wife there. It's a rural community about 30 minutes southwest of Milwaukee. And we got married in 2005. 3 children I have swarming around me. They were born in 2007, 2009, 2011. And then in the summer of 2013, my friend who teaches at the University of Nevada, he invited us to come out here. He was always sending taunting text messages about how great it was. So we decided to come out and visit for 5 days and really, just enjoyed the area, kind of hit all the highlights and, loved I've always been a history person, so I love some of the history. But then we went back and didn't think too much of it until the worst winter since 1977 set in. We had below zero wind chills for 2 months straight and couldn't really take the kids outside much. And we decided, it's okay maybe to try something else. And so I literally, was looking for jobs out in this area. And on Christmas Eve of 2013, I saw this job posted. And so I don't know if that was a sign, but it sure seemed like a sign, and it's worked out pretty well. So we've been here 8 years, and I just keep finding more reasons to love the community.
Well, thank you. That was an entertaining introduction. Appreciate it. We're going to go ahead and start asking questions now. Now, keep in mind, do not be offended or think we're rude if we have our head down. We may be taking notes at certain times throughout the interview. And so we're going to go ahead and start. And Mr. Mike Walker is going to ask you your first question.
Guten Morgen, Herr Fuhling.
Guten Morgen.
That was a test to see how close you paid attention. That was probably the first thing you learned. So, what would be your priorities for the first 90 days in your district?
So I just have one clarifying question to ask here. So I know I was asked to provide, kind of a 90-day plan. Am I able to reference that, or would you just like me to? That might get into a lot of detail, and I can otherwise just speak about generalities. I wasn't sure kind of what the expectation was.
I think as a candidate, I'm going to leave that up to you. How would you best present that information to the panel and the community at large?
Okay. So I think I'm just going to kind of speak in general tones then, because we might get into the weeds a little bit with what was provided, and I know we don't have unlimited time. So I think initially, and I would hope that anyone coming into this position, you're coming in and you're listening and listening and listening. I don't believe, it wouldn't be appropriate to come in and start talking and talking and talking and telling people what to do. The play by Shakespeare, Julius Caesar, there's a famous line that Mark Antony delivers: "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears." I feel like it's, for me, it's friends, fellow Carsonites and colleagues, let me lend you my ears, right? So just being out there and trying to soak up everything you can. You're not going to learn things a better way. And that'll lead, I think the second point is just building relationships. That's going to be the starting point. But getting out there, internal, external, all of you, even though I know you, and for some of you, you've been around as long as I've been here. But clearly the role, the relationship is greater in this way, circumstance. So I think that would be time well spent. Getting data informed, I didn't come up with that term, but it is a term I like. I don't like data driven, and I think data informed kind of came from people who are frustrated with data driven. Right? We're here for kids. We're doing things for kids. We're not doing things because of the data. But just to really take a peek at what, under the hood and see what is going on with outcomes for kids. And last, I think just in general, we have a new school year coming up. We've had 2 years of discontinuity for our families, and we just to make sure that feel like we're being prepared for the new year, just like we would in any other circumstance. But I think just given the circumstances, extra care has to be given with that. With somebody new coming in, even in my role, there's conversations that I'm not always involved with, and again, just listening and trying to understand what's going on. Clearly, nationally and statewide, and in Carson City, there's significant labor shortages, which are crippling in many cases, as we know all too well. And so really, I think that has to be one of the highest priorities coming in as well, actually, is just kind of getting a pulse check on where we are. There are things we can do, at least to make it easier for retirees to come back and things like that. And I just think jumping on those things earlier rather than later would be helpful. So that's kind of the initial. I think the summer, then you have all your welcome back, feel good pieces. I would love to do kind of a larger district-wide welcome back event, even if it's only for 30 minutes, just to say hi to everyone and kind of build that feeling of school community after a rough 2 years. I think would be really nice. What I call the triple S meetings, stop, sustain, and start. So when we come back and I start having opportunities to meet with our community members, to meet with parents, to meet with our staff, to meet with our students. Again, this isn't a new idea, but I think what's critical, so that the stop is what should we consider not doing anymore. The start is what do we need to be doing, but the sustain in the middle. So usually you just think about what do we continue, and I think this is the finance guy in me. I don't like the idea of just continuing because we like it and we're comfortable with it. It's about sustaining that. And sustain, I think, is an extra level of commitment because that means you're putting resources toward it. So, and I think if you're going to put resources toward it, you're going to defend it. And so, what are those things that we really want to continue and we're willing to defend to do that? So, hopefully, within all that, you're building trust. Ultimately, that is the key piece. Not having trust is the biggest tax on an organization. You've got to have that belief in your people. Your people have to believe in you. The not having that trust just slows things down, and really just makes you digress, I think, from the direction that you're trying to get to.
Thank you.
Mike, you have any clarifying questions at all? Okay, thank you, Mr. Fueling. We're going to move on to question number 2, and this will be asked by Mrs. Laurel Crossman.
Hi, Mr. Fueling. My question for you is, community engagement and connectivity are vital for a school district. What will you do to ensure the stakeholders and members of the community feel ownership and value in the school district?
Thank you, Mrs. Crossman. So to feel true ownership, and I think that's a really important term in leadership, in life, in your communities. If you want your community to thrive, that it's not one to be taken lightly. But if you're going to have true ownership, you have to have some level of engagement. That you can't. I don't think you can feel ownership if you're not engaged. So the example, the analogy I would use is, many people end up investing in stocks, right? And I don't know if everybody knows this, but when you buy stock in a company, you're buying ownership. You literally are an owner in that company. I would argue that for most people, they don't feel like they're an owner in that company. It's an investment, and they're hoping that'll help them with their future. But it's not the same. It's not the same thing because you're not engaged. It's not unless you're someone who owns 10% of a company and you're going to all the shareholder meetings. Maybe it's different, but for average everyday folks, it's just not the same. So, but then they're engaged, right? So that engagement is kind of a key piece of that. So, ultimately, if you're having engagement, you're talking about things coming together, and so there has to be some kind of physical, mental, emotional connection, interaction happening to have that engagement. And I think just with where we have been the last 2 years, and this was true before, but I think that physical engagement at this point is probably the most critical thing that we need to bring back, and not just bring back, but enhance. And to me, that is bringing people into schools. Part of it is seeing is believing. And when you have people coming in that can look around, and it might be, I would hope it's as volunteering, and I think you'll hear that as a little bit of a theme here, that we have got to get out there and, it sounds bad, whether they want to volunteer or not, drag them into the schools and give them to volunteer. I really feel like that has to be a part of what we're doing, is trying to get our community members, our parents into the school so they can feel comfortable again, and they believe in they're doing, what we're doing, they see what we're doing. And maybe it's working, again, with the labor shortage. That would be a great piece of this as well. I think I mentioned that in my welcome back letter, just an open invitation for people to come in and maybe consider working for us if they haven't. I think the events we have, and I will say I've been pleasantly surprised, and not surprised, that's the wrong way, just appreciative, I think, of the events that a lot of our school administrators host around the district. Sometimes just showing appreciation to groups, and I know many schools do this. And early when I first got here, the two that stood out to me, Seeliger Elementary did a really nice Veterans Day ceremony. Actually, my friend from Reno that kind of convinced us to consider coming out here. He works with the Army ROTC, and he's a veteran of Iraq and Bosnia, and so he actually came down for that. My kids got to present him, and it was such a great feel-good community event. And the other thing Seeliger did, and you probably all know, and Mr. Creaney and Mr. Walker, I'm sure you probably participated more than you liked over the years, but the pumpkin patch event. Just what a fantastic way to bring people in and just see smiling faces and kind of appreciate your community. So I think things like that are really critical, especially again after COVID, where you weren't able to have the physical presence together. I think that'll be would be a great way to heal. And when you have that kind of physical interaction, that engagement, I think I think anyone who steps into a school, and it's not just our schools, I think it's like there is value there in what you are seeing. When you're seeing a kid's smiling face, there are good things happening. When you see kids engaged in a classroom, I had the opportunity to sub at Mark Twain last Friday, and I give all sorts of credit to elementary school teachers because I've never really been in an elementary classroom in a teaching capacity before, and that was an experience. But seeing the kids just knew a lot of what to do, and they were engaged, and they're making it happen. And I think the feeling you get from that, especially for people who aren't familiar with school, and I'm more familiar than most, I guess. I think they would see that, and that would just light them up. So that that value is thick and tangible when you are there. And I think if they see value, often those people then want to engage in it even more. And it's kind of this feedback loop with what what is happening and people wanting to be a part of that. I think the other side of the question, Mrs. Crossman, is we also live in an age that has changed quite a bit with internet and social media. And I think there is an expectation of transparency. I don't know if that's exactly the right word, but that you can know what's going on kind of at any moment, right? We have 24/7 news. I can search up any term I want, anytime, learn about anything. So if I want to know what's happening in my kid's school, I should be able to find out. And that can be taken, that can be a slippery slope. So I think you have to be kind of careful with that. But I think in this circumstance, it's utilizing those resources of the internet and social media. To me, it is an area we can grow to utilize that to show what's happening in the schools on a more regular basis. And I think the regularity is really important because that makes it seem more transparent because it's just always going on. You're not just showing the single best thing. There's everyday awesome going on in Carson City schools. And so it's going around the district and pulling these pieces. Maybe it's just little videos of, 30-second videos of what's happening in a classroom and teachers just doing amazing things with kids and they're happy and engaged. I think there's something to that. So I think building that engagement and building that trust, that connectivity with the community that you mentioned, I think that's also a part of it that we can work on.
Thank you. I was just going to say that everyday awesome would make a great hashtag.
I'm in.
There you go. Thank you, Mr. Fueling. I'll be asking the next question. Yeah. Given the current climate regarding equity-based learning, CRT or critical race theory, COVID response, and political divisiveness, how will you lead the district to gain community and staff support while advancing the academic success of our students?
Thank you, President Varner. So it is, it's unfortunate. I think that some of it goes back to just kind of a trust and just a rough two years of a lot of this, and you kind of have this. I call it like this pathological duality. There is, it's either you have these two sides, and it seems like kind of the moderating forces have just gone away, and you have two sides. and it's you're either with me or you're against me. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of anything in the middle. It's just this barren wasteland. And yeah, I think it's kind of a strange kind of point in time, and I'm sure there have been other times in history like this. And it's not for bad reasons. I mean there's legitimate concerns all around, and it's a confusing time, and there's a lot of uncertainty. So it's the world we're in. But I would say that, it's like, is there hope? And I think the answer is yes. And I think the answer to me is really embedded in the answer from the last question. I think it's about getting your community, the community has to feel ownership. Community has to feel value in what is happening there. And if they are in the schools, if parents are in the schools, if they are seeing is believing rather than what they might be hearing about what's going on. I think that I don't think there could be anything more powerful in trying to get people to just, I think, be okay with what's happening and realize that there are a lot of really good people doing a lot of really good things that are creating value, and then you get in there and you see the smiles, and I'll throw out the everyday awesome again, since that apparently went over well. The value when you're there and if you're engaged in it and you're working with the kids and you're having fun with them, I mean that value is just thick. I don't know how someone couldn't be turned into a supporter of what is happening in schools if they are in there doing that sort of thing. And if you have community members and you have parents doing that sort of thing, you then have, for our staff, so part of the question is our staff, so they're going to have, one way or another, more support in the schools, right? You're going to have these adults that are trying to help out. It might be in a classroom, it might be outside of the classroom, it might be making copies, it might be during lunch periods, and I don't know exactly what it looks like, and I think every school will figure that out for themselves. But then those outside community members and parents, they're seeing what's going on in the schools. They're seeing the magic, and they're seeing the people that are responsible for facilitating that magic. How do you not appreciate that? And magic's an important term too. And you saw it's kind of a secondary welcome letter to some other transient members of our community that end up in a fancy building on Carson Street for a couple months each year. But that word is really important, and it was used very specifically because I think the idea of magic is oftentimes you're creating something out of nothing, right? And so much of what our staff is doing, it's our teachers and support staff and administrators, that they are making it happen. Even if the resources might not always be perfect, they are making it happen. So I think that if our community members see that value will be there, and then you have the relationships that have been built, so that's a good thing. And then for our kids, now you have more volunteers in the school supporting them. They can get more individual attention, more help. They're seeing positive role models, having good relationships with adults. If we can do all that, we presume positive intentions along the way. We're doing all that. We rehumanize all of ourselves with each other. That's to build that trust. That's what you need.
Thank you, Mr. Fueling. The next question will be asked by Mrs. Lupe Ramirez.
Mr. Fueling, describe effective methods you have used to ensure the safety and well-being of students and staff. Include how you've addressed diversity, equity, and inclusion in the district.
Thank you, Trustee Ramirez. So my answer will probably not exactly be like anybody else's, just from my experiences. But I don't think it's not any less important, but it may not even be exactly from the angle that kind of what the intent of the question was. So bear with me a little bit. So as far as the safety and well-being piece, my work with that has been more related to my job. So when I first came to the district, we had been working on safety single point of entry projects around the district and ran out of money. So we needed to go out and bond again. And that's kind of where that was my first bonding experience here, to get funds to help take care of the rest of those projects around the district. And actually, I think specifically at that point, I was finishing up Carson High School was kind of the last big part of that. And otherwise, working with our risk manager a number of years ago to secure funding to refresh all of the camera technology around the district, everything related to the kind of surveillance and being able to keep an eye on our assets, both kind of physical district assets and our kids, and making sure that things are being taken care of. As far as well-being, we've done that to me kind of takes me more to the operations side. We've done work over the years trying to bring cleaning products into the district that are greener, that are safer for all of us to be around, improving air quality, putting in bottle fillers around the district, keeping kids hydrated. It's a key piece to the human condition. So that is something that does help the cause. That's actually an interesting one too. Being in a classroom, and I mean, as adults, you go around and you see people carrying bottles all the time now, but in the classroom, it just is a little different. And when I was in school, you weren't allowed to have anything. Although I don't think water bottles really existed kind of like that either. So just kind of a little side note. As far as diversity, kind of the diversity, equity, and inclusion piece, again, my side of that is a little different, but I'll bring it back to my teaching days in a second. Just thinking about my little department, fiscal services, and I have, even within my small department, I have some diversity, a little demographic, but definitely some ideological and kind of work process and communication. But I believe if you asked my staff, if you explain to them what we mean by an inclusive environment, I believe they would say that, yeah, we have an inclusive environment. We have people with kind of different, all these things, and yet they all work together really well, and I think they all like each other. And I think, they're my family. I see them all the time. I love them. They're amazing people. And just like me, they're not perfect, but we continue to find ways to improve and try to make things better. So, in my teaching experience, I think, and this kind of gets into, I think, a little bit more of the diversity. At least I hope it comes across that this is something that has been important to me for a long time. And I go back to my fifth grade teacher I mentioned, who kind of opened up the world to me and really got me interested in, I guess, just understanding there was more than what I saw around me, with the globe and different cultures, and forcing us to try new foods from other countries, and it was fantastic. But so the school I taught at, East Troy High School in Wisconsin, is a very rural community, about 4,000 people, and not diverse at all. And so the opportunity came up. I think it was my second year teaching. It used to be called the AFS Club, and that might be more familiar to some of you. And a lot of times, if kids wanted to travel abroad for a semester during high school, that was the club they did. I think American Field Service, I think, is what AFS stands for. But it had turned into the multicultural club at our school. And so the advisor at that time stepped out, and I knew this was something I would enjoy doing. So it was something that I jumped into right away. And so we would get together, and it wasn't kind of a everyday thing or even an every week thing, but we'd have kind of events and get together and talk about different places and enjoy food and that sort of thing. And we took a trip to Sweden, which was a great experience for me. The first time I'd taken I did many field trips in my time. That was the first field trip I ever did. It scared me to death because you're going to another country. But very nice people in Sweden, so everything went really well. But it was a really good experience for those kids to get out and see some different things. In the area, we in southern Milwaukee, our south side of Milwaukee, there's it's the large mosque for the area, so with the Islamic community. And so we took a trip there for a half day, and I just think that was a real eye-opener for the kids because none of them had ever seen anything like that before, and just had a really nice presentation and a walk around and, the architecture and all that, and just soaking up just that feeling of something, feeling like you're almost in a different world. And that was a great experience, and that actually led us to then going to the Madison area, where they have, it was a Buddhist temple in Madison, and it was absolutely enormous. It was overwhelming for the kids because of how big it was. And literally walking into a golden Buddha statue that I feel like it seemed like it was like 30 feet high and 30 feet across. It was just gigantic. But again, kind of the same thing where kids knew nothing about it. But then you're talking about, so where are these religions in the world and why do they exist? And, just that appreciation and understanding. And again, it's not that they have to, we're not talking about agreeing or anything like that, but just the experience and realizing that there's people from different walks of life, different cultural norms, different expectations. When we talk about social emotional learning, there's five competencies within that, and the two their self-awareness. So, kids understanding what themselves, right, and what they value, what their culture is, what their norms are, but then also social awareness. One of the other competencies, and it's really just the opposite, is kind of seeing those things around you, being able to understand that there's different ways of doing things. And so it's not exactly maybe the intent of the question, but I think that's the best experiences I have where I could say that there's something to offer and that I've had some experience.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question will be asked by Mr. Joe Cassiopo.
Hi, Mr. Fueling. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Doing well. Okay, the question I have for you is, how will you meet the individual learning needs of every student to foster student achievement with a growth mindset? How would you track and measure this?
Thank you, Trustee Cassiopo. So the first thing, I think what's really important, and the term gets thrown around a lot, but in the scheme of what what we think education should be, the process of education, it's a really important term, and that's the growth mindset piece. So it's not complicated, but it's really just this idea that we shouldn't be placing limitations on the expectations for our kids, they shouldn't be placing limitations on their own expectations. And some of that goes back to brain research and what they call brain plasticity. Basically, that your brain can rewire and do these things that maybe before it couldn't, but with hard work and hopefully some curiosity and interest along the way, there can be some growth that maybe wasn't expected at first. But so the reason that definition becomes important, though, is the kind of the next logical step is, well, if we're not limited, right, that limitation does not exist, then there is no reason that we can't have high expectations across the board for kids. And there is every reason to get them every opportunity we can and reduce any barriers to those opportunities so that they can have the opportunity to try to access the highest expectations, right? And it's not about every kid getting to the exact same outcome, right? That's not going to happen. But getting the access to those opportunities so that having those high expectations as a goal is completely realistic and makes sense, and it's something that I think we would want to do. And so in education terms, you'll hear this kind of curricular idea of having a coherent, guaranteed, and viable curriculum. And this high expectations piece, and the opportunities to access it is a part of that guaranteed curriculum, right? This is something that we believe all kids should be able to access, they can get to, and they're going to be successful with. So then within that, before you get to that point, what is helpful is having what's called a coherent curriculum. So this is just that everything is aligned. Things through the years make sense. Things across the different curricular areas make sense. Within those areas, you have assessments that make sense in terms of the standards that you have and the goals you're trying to hit. So all those things kind of make sense to you. And so if you have that alignment and it's across everything, it makes it much easier because of the kind of some of the standardization. It's not that every classroom is doing the same thing in the same way, but with the assessment piece, that there's similar assessments and we know that they're showing if the standards are being met or not, then it's easy to see where kids are and how they're doing, and maybe where the deficiencies are and where do we need to get in and offer support. And if we get to a point where we feel that kiddo is good again, and we can try that assessment again and maybe try it in a different way as a check for learning. So if we can have that all set up, and to a great extent, the Race to the Top program over the years, that was a huge part of what Race to the Top was for the district, was that curriculum alignment piece and trying to get to that coherent, guaranteed, viable curriculum that we have in the district. The last piece of that is then having, that's a lot of data, ultimately. And so having something that allows you to crunch it, do the analysis and put out something that can be used quickly and on the fly. With a lot of assessments that teachers do, they're formative. They're kind of just happening as we go. They're quick, and it's a kind of a quick check, and where are we, and you move on. But I think the question you're asking is more centered around kind of the summative piece and kind of ultimately showing like what do you really know about this standard or what we're trying to do in school here. And so I think you have to have something like that for staff to access to know what's happening with students and where we need to provide the support for those kids so that they can have the achievement that we hope of them.
Thank you.
Thank you again. This next question will be asked by Mrs. Crossman, and just keep in mind it is a two-part question.
Okay, and also I just wanted to, Mr. Varner had asked me to start a clock for 75 minutes, and we are at 30 minutes remaining on that, so about 45 minutes left of our 90-minute timeframe. So we're halfway through the questions, so just to give everybody an idea on that. My question for you, Mr. Fueling, how do you describe the roles of the superintendent and board, and how do they work together? And then the second question, part of that would be, how would you keep the board informed of developments in the district?
Thank you, Mrs. Crossman. So your official role to me is you are the community. You are this distilled representation of the community. So as your only employee, the schools are the community schools. And so as your only employee, your guidance, your wishes are what we are trying to execute kind of within the parameters that we're allowed. Ultimately there is law on some of those things. So I think what's really important, we have to have a good relationship, but I think the healthy relationship is that you all have to have a good relationship, and then we have a good relationship. That kind of high functioning board where you're presuming positive intentions, and I think, I've probably been in front of 20 boards in my time, most of them back in Wisconsin, but you guys, you have it. The agreement isn't always there, different opinions, but I think the presuming positive intentions piece is, I can't imagine it being any better. And so to me, that is huge. I feel like with the current superintendent, you completely believe that as well. And if you all believe that and that trust is there, that is going to get you down the road you need to go. So I think the next piece then was asking about, sorry, I'm just going to reference the question.
How would you keep the board informed of developments within the
Right.
district?
Right. The one other thing I've mentioned, then otherwise, like the relationship, ultimately, in board, you're setting policy. And in my role, and kind of just otherwise providing guidance. And in my role, I'm executing, right? So I'm the chief executive officer. The executive officer is the one who is supposed to make things happen. I might create regulations, or we might create regulations along the way to kind of further define that and help those processes along. But it's, I think of myself as in executing those things, like kind of bringing your will, and if you were going to have a bullhorn to be able to speak as the board amongst the schools and what you want to see, I'm kind of the volume, I guess, and the message kind of coming through and making sure everyone's hearing it and making those things happen. Then as far as keeping the board informed, I think that having, regular meetings, and I know this already happens with the current superintendent and the board president. I'm not sure actually if there's regular meetings outside of that with all the board members, but I think that having some kind of regular meeting with all the members individually, and not to generate a walking quorum, and I'm aware of that, but I think that that relationship is so important with all of you, and it's about building that trust. And not that I'm always going to agree with every opinion you have, and you're not always going to agree with mine, but at least we're on the same page. Having just kind of regular checkup emails along the way, I think is it's currently what you expect. And I mean, ultimately, some of this, I think what you expect is what I would do. You would always have access to a phone number to give me a call or send me a text. If there was ever really pressing issues, you'd probably get a phone call from me, or I would expect a phone call from you. And potentially if there was some type of emergency situation, it would be kind of a text blast along the way. But, with that communication, I think we would all the goal is ultimately we're all on the same page and we have the same information. We're not always going to be able to communicate kind of in real time as some things maybe occur. But then that goes back to the trust. It goes back to the relationships that we have and knowing the type of people you are and what you may expect. You having trust in me to make decisions in some of those circumstances. But ultimately, I want to put you in the best position for success. So, when you're having meetings like this, I'm trying to get you the information you need. I mean, there's information you're requesting, but there's other information that is helpful to the process. I'm trying to get that to you. I'm trying to put you in the best position to make good decisions. And that's not just trying to make you look good, but because I want you to make the best decisions for our kids and for our staff. So that ultimately is, I think, how I feel the relationship should look like, and in that communication piece, that's the secondary part. I think that really is kind of just embedded within that first need as well. And again, I don't know, just having that relationship and communication doesn't mean that we aren't going to disagree on some items, but having that presumption of positive intentions, having that good relationship, having that trust, that's humans. We're just not always going to agree, but I'm going to carry out ultimately what the board wishes.
Thank you, Mr. Fielding. The next question will be asked by Mr. Mike Walker.
How do you determine if professional development provided by the district is improving student learning and teacher administrator performance and morale?
Thank you, Mr. Walker. So I want to start with the morale piece a little first, because I think that can be a part of it, but it also can be have other influences. And just to kind of, I guess, clarify my thoughts on it. So morale is clearly really important. We wouldn't talk about it so much, I think, if it wasn't. And organizations with high morale, they just operate better. I would argue that a lot of that has to do with trust. Again, if you have employees that feel like they're trusted and they feel like they can trust their supervisors, management, that is usually going to build some morale. With the professional development piece of it, so clearly if you are good at, if you believe you are good at what you are trying to do, if you're good at executing, you have that kind of self-efficacy, as they call it. That in itself, psychological research shows usually that brings morale. Like that brings a good sense because you bring value, as long as you're being recognized, by your supervisor or whatever it might be. And so if professional development is making people better at what they do and they recognize that, I think that would kind of logically then lead to a building morale. In a sense of, so much of what the shift in education. There's been a lot with education reform in the last 40 years, and some good and some bad. But I think one of the good things is that, you know, trying to recognize that this isn't something that is done on an island. And, you know, we need to, if you're really going to utilize your resources, you need to work together and be able to have this, you have this common interest and this common goal. And I don't know everything, and you don't know everything, but together we know a lot more. And we can come up with some creative ideas for solutions to things. And so I think believing in that group and what the group can do, we call it group efficacy. If you believe that as a group, you can do those sorts of great things and you can execute. That, to me, should bring that same level of morale building as the self-efficacy. But what's interesting about that is there's this researcher, John Hattie, who over the years has kind of been updating this document through analyzing all these educational studies about what matters in student learning. And the number one thing, and it's been the number one thing for a long time, has been this group efficacy piece. And if a group has that tends to have, or that has the greatest impact in research of anything that we can do for kids, is simply our group of teachers understanding, believing that they are making a difference, and as a group, it's making even a bigger difference that they can execute. So, the caution then is that morale can also be influenced by a lot of other things, and so I wouldn't say that you throw out a professional development entirely because morale, because you might find some places where morale isn't spectacular, because there may be some other things. I think it's fair to say there could be other things that influence that. But so if you're looking at least if morale is something that you're caring to kind of track and see and know what's happening, it's not the most objective thing to measure, but I think you can get a sense of it if you're there. I think you can have a sense of it. I think you can do, you know, survey data, and just anecdotally, you know, kind of what is happening. So that's that morale piece, and I want to leave that alone. I think for there, and hopefully that makes sense. But then kind of getting into the student learning piece of it. So one of the really important things, and again, this gets talked a lot about in my financial world, and when I go to events and conferences, and quite honestly, there's the finance people get frustrated with how things will get implemented, and usually it's professional development type items, you know, these initiatives that are supported with professional development. But there's no sunsetting or plan in place to evaluate, is this making a difference? And I wanted to say this because I think this is part of the heart of the question: is it okay to bring in an initiative that you think is going to do awesome things for kids and staff? I don't know that anyone would disagree with that it is good. But I think it's really fair and an obligation on all of us, not only for the sustainability of programs, the sanity of our people, and the limited resources we have, to take a step back then and say, okay, so what is the time frame we expect to see results? Because most of the time it's not going to be a year, and I think that's something that it's really hard because over time we just expect things to happen faster because the world around us happens faster, and I just think it's really unrealistic to see big changes in a year with almost anything we do. But is 3 years a fair time frame? Maybe. I mean, it might depend on the program, but to actually have a place and time to say, okay, let's stop and take a look at this, and are we getting what we expected out of this, and does it make sense? And considering how much funds and really, I mean, clearly on my side, the funding piece is huge, but the time resource piece that that is put on all of our staff, that is just, I think it has become a little overwhelming in ways. And so just being really cognizant of how important that is and what a special resource that is, and we need to make thoughtful decisions in kind of appreciating it in that way. So I guess the point was most districts have problems with that, and you might have different opinions of if we do or not, but I think that what's important is just what do we expect to do going forward, and I think that that's a reasonable place to be with any of this PD. So then the question is how do you know if it's working, right? So you have a time frame on it. Well, how do you know it's working? Well, because the superintendent said so. And that's not a good answer, right? So you want to have something else there, and clearly you have the trust, but there's a further obligation to you and responsibility to you to make sure that it's being used well. So the common place to go, I think, with any of this stuff, especially if it is over a number of years, as you're looking at standardized test scores, and there's such an enormous focus on these. Across the nation, across the state. And I would just say that you need to, there should be some caution there, because I think one of the things that over time, clearly there's only so much we can do, but I would probably challenge you over time to consider what those scores are really telling us. I don't think it's really what we think it is in its purest form. There are a lot of other things going on there, and so it may not be the best gauge. Can it be a place to look? Absolutely. Can it be a part of the equation? Absolutely. But for that to be the be all end all, I would question that. Sorry, phone's vibrating. So some of the problems, some of the concerns is that standardized tests are looking at just a couple places. In general, it's math and ELA, right? And there's a lot more going on. We want to see success across the board, so it has to be something bigger than that. I don't know that the incentives are always aligned properly, where the results are always really meaningful. And the example I would give, and I've given this over the years, I had a student who was absolutely brilliant when I was teaching at East Troy High School. And when it came to his standardized test, I was just very shocked how he did not come in as proficient, and he was well below standard. And he just didn't care about it. He wasn't concerned about it. He decided to do the writing portion in Spanish because he thought it would be funny. And I was being judged on that. So that was kind of a real personal hit to me. And you see across the board nationally, ACT and SAT scores starting to be not used as much or weighted as much in decisions about college entrance. So again, just something that I think we all just need to keep in mind. But where it does go then, where I think it goes, and it comes back to what we were talking about earlier, you have this coherent, guaranteed, viable curriculum. You have all of these assessments aligned, curriculums aligned, assessments are aligned. You would be able to look at longitudinal data between classes. You could see hopefully that growth over time, better scores over time. If you have that right software program, you can go in and offer support to kids if they need it. You can offer support to teachers if they need it, right? So one of the bad things I think that came with educational reform is there's this focus on, if things aren't going right, then that teacher is ineffective, and so that we got to do something, punitively. And when you look at countries that are actually really successful, countries like Denmark, countries like Singapore, that do have some sort of testing requirement like this, it's not that it's punitive. It's okay. So where do we go in and support? How do we go in and help our staff, right? And so that kind of it's that professional development kind of spiral, I think, and you're just trying to build people along the way. So I don't know if that answers everything, but I feel like there's a lot we can do within our schools to measure what we see, what the success is with professional development, and I think we have the capacity ourselves to do a lot of that. I think we already do, fortunately, with some of the work that we've done. It just might take some fine tuning. I think to get there.
Thank you, Mr. Feeling. I'll be asking the next question. Faced with a significant change in revenue, increase or decrease, how would you approach budget development for the upcoming fiscal year and share your experience budgeting and deficit spending?
Thank you, President Varner. So, big picture, the answer is strategic plan, strategic plan, strategic plan. You know, the circumstance of your budget does not take that focus away. And to me, and this was in my previous district as well, that is the crutch that you can go to anytime. And not that it shouldn't be kind of in thought on a regular basis, like the community, and you have laid out, here's what we want, here's what's important to us. But I think oftentimes we get so caught up in the process, and it's really confusing. And there's so many angles and so many things to worry about that we kind of we can lose track of it. But that is just it makes things so clear, and not that it always makes the answer obvious, but it just makes it really clear that you can lean back on it. Like, okay, so let's just take a step back. Let's go back here. What are we trying to do? What does our community want us to do? What does the board think we should be doing? That is such a valuable thing, and not every district has that. This is really, I know it's a big process. I know it's a big deal to go through, but this is a good thing for everybody that it exists. More detail kind of to your question. So the budget process, as I see it, and the ups or downs of revenue, when you're doing a budget process, you start with revenue, because you can't go anywhere without that. You don't know, there's no meaning to the rest of it. There's no obvious kind of endpoint to even think about if you don't have that revenue piece. You need to know how much money you have to work with. You're rolling your costs forward. At that point, assuming no changes, and just to kind of get a baseline. But I think, again, it's a really bad assumption. It's kind of like when you're bringing in initiatives. It's a really bad assumption that if things look good or they look fine, you have a balanced budget, that there should be no changes, right? This is about utilizing your resources in the best way you can to get the most bang for your buck within the parameters of what is important to your community, right? So I might have this idea that I think is amazing, that I think is going to do a lot for our kids, and we may talk about it, but ultimately, if it doesn't fit within the strategic plan, if it just, there's something off about it, then that's okay. Then it's something that maybe doesn't happen, but having those conversations and having that guidance through it, I think is is critical, and just assuming things should carry on is bad. And again, that's in good times or bad. When times are bad financially, like, you have to have those kind of conversations. But those conversations should not really be any different when times are good. It's a question of, you have X amount of resources, what's the best way to utilize them? So I think, just kind of generically back to the question, but if you have really substantial increases or decreases, the conversations have to be a little more substantial, because you're talking about the magnitude of the impact can be so big. You have to have some, I think, bigger conversations, longer conversations about, what are we trying to do here, and how is this aligning with the strategic plan of the district, and what are our limitations? And as you all know, those feel like, we got a 1-year reprieve this year, but we've had those kind of conversations, and we're probably going to have more over the next years. So my experience, as you know, I've been here almost 8 years now. Had a little over 3 years of experience before I came here. Worked with a school district in Wisconsin in this same capacity. I worked for a company that did this kind of work for districts all across the state of Wisconsin. And it was, I think at that time, what was, I had only been doing it for about 2.5 years, and it was a really unique circumstance, because I knew I was looking to move west at that time. And this company, Robert W. Baird, who was the most respected financial institution in the state of Wisconsin, and they have this whole division dedicated to school finance. And they basically came and asked me to please come and work for them. And it was about the most flattering thing that I had ever had happen to me at that time. So, to me early on, it felt like I was being recognized for doing this work. And I feel like I've been recognized for doing this work here in Nevada, and just been fortunate to work with such great people here in the district and around the state. There's just a lot of really good people that care a whole lot about this. And so, and one of the things, kind of a side note to this, and I hope I answered the question. And this is a little unique to me, and I don't want you to feel like, if this were to happen, that somehow you're losing your finance guy. I think, so there's 2 really good examples in the state of where the finance person moving into a superintendent's role has been really successful. And I'll say, I don't know of any that have failed, but I only know these 2, so I don't know what that means exactly. But Dr. Dave Jensen out in Humboldt, who's a fantastic guy, he started in a finance role. And then if you've been around a little bit longer, Jeff Zander out in Elko. And Jeff was the man statewide when it came to finance. And then when he moved into that role, what it allowed him to do, he became the go-to guy of the rural superintendents for almost anything, because he had that financial background. And just because you're being involved there doesn't mean you don't have an eye, and you don't have, we're going to find somebody better than me to come into this role. And it is with that, when we get to the legislative session, we're going to have a lot going for us, and a lot going for all the rural districts. So I don't want that. If that is a concern at all, I don't want it to be a concern. Ultimately, I'm still in the building, and have access to me like I have access to Mr. Stokes. So I just hope that's not a fear.
Thank you. The next question.
Mr. President, if I may, that concludes 1 hour and 15 minutes. So we have about 15 minutes remaining.
Okay, and you have 2 questions left.
Mr. President, I'm sorry
Yes.
to interrupt, but I just want the board to be aware that the agenda does include a hard stop date or a stop time of 9:30.
Okay, thank you. The next question will be asked by Don Greeny.
What experience do you have in advocating for public education at local, state, and national levels?
Thank you, Mr. Carini. So at the local level, we'll start there. I think it's important to understand, kind of go back to the question about our relationship and, what is the board and kind of where am I in this picture? And again, as far as I'm concerned, you are the community. You are this distilled version of the community. And so when over the years you're listening to me go on and on about some of these topics and the graphs of some good and some doom and gloom over the years, I feel like I'm advocating locally just there, because you then are going out and you have your friends and your families. And I think, we think of advocacy as, kind of these events, and it doesn't always have to be. And I even think, some of the smaller conversations that I have with my friends, here in the community, those are really important, because they have groups of friends and people that they go work with, and they talk about these things. So I think that's a really important. It's important to keep in mind that it doesn't have to be an event necessarily. I've been to Rotary to speak some years ago on the district and what's going on here. There was a presentation to NNDA a number of years ago at a breakfast event they had. The leadership Carson City group has come through the schools a number of times, and I've spoken with them on school funding and other issues. So that kind of is, I think, the local piece. At the state level, I think I have more experience than most, and some of it is just being fortunate to be in the position I'm in, and taking advantage of the access that I have to certain people and time to do some of these things. So I'm a regular participant and attendee at during the legislative session at committee hearings. Up until this point, generally just about funding issues and concerns that we've had over the years. I think some of you joined me, Mrs. Crossman. I think I remember you a number of years back being there at one time. So meeting with our senator for the time I've been here, it's been Ben Kekeffer, who's just a fantastic guy, and he's been very gracious with his time with Carson City. 2 assemblymen, Al Kramer and PK O'Neill, over time. Working with Al Kramer, he was absolutely critical in helping us get Assembly Bill 244 passed in 2019. At that time, we were so concerned about explosive growth in the district and having the capital funds to provide facilities for kids. And COVID has kind of taken this conversation sideways, unfortunately, and that was a lot of work. And it really made me appreciate the importance of the relationships that you need to have, not only with your own people, but the importance of knowing other senators and assemblymen from other areas. And they may not represent you, but it is really hard to get a bill passed when you're Carson City and we're not that big. You gotta know some people, and so that's just really, really important. I've worked with other districts, when the Nevada Association of Superintendents develops their INVEST document about funding education, that's something that a lot of the finance folks from other districts come together and kind of help formulate some of the, at least the numbers, and trying to tell some of that story. I worked in 2019 kind of behind the scenes with some of the initial development questions of a pupil-centered funding plan. Even though it didn't exactly work out, I think how we hoped, I'm currently on the Commission on School Funding, so it's not necessarily advocacy specific to our district, but it's hard not to advocate for our district with the way certain things within the new model impact us, and there's other districts, kind of in the same boat. So that there is some advocacy going on there, but it's not exactly to the legislative level. It's more about advocating to get a certain opinion from our group that then moves on. At the federal level, truly, I've never, other than I think sending maybe a couple letters over the years, and even back in Wisconsin, I have not really been very personally engaged at the federal level, although my national school business network, which I used to go to the conferences before COVID, and I had certification through them, and they have great information. They're very involved at the federal level, so they'll ask us to sometimes write things or give opinions on things, and that's kind of how at the federal level be involved. I do know we only have 4 minutes left, and I will make quick work of the next question.
Okay, that question will be asked by Joe Cassiopo.
All right, I'll get to it quick since I know we're running out of time. If there was an event of potential unethical behavior, how would you respond to allegations of this unethical behavior in our district? So,
educators, as you may or may not know, in education, we are legally held to a higher standard of care with our interactions and what is going on in schools and expectations for us. So, any type of accusation of unethical behavior is significant, and I don't think anybody would minimize that or sweep that aside when it came up. Just like any other concern, you investigate, and you go through it's due process, right? You're innocent until proven guilty. You're just trying to gather information. You've probably had a conversation with that person and the other parties involved, gathering all that, and then ultimately, once you have all that information, you are, potentially making a determination as to, what was there really some type of event here that was of serious concern? Is it something there's a miscommunication? Is it a misunderstanding? And that happens as well. The way things are said, the way things are done aren't always exactly clearly understood, or that it's just the way things happen. But once you have all that information, you make that determination. And again, you're having some trust in the supervisor making that determination as to the magnitude of the infraction. If it's small, maybe rather harmless, maybe not intentional, just not well thought. It might just be a verbal thing. It might be kind of a early progressive discipline step just to kind of reinforce the importance of, you don't want to, there's mistakes, but the unethical nature, to me, there's a higher level of concern and caution that comes with that. So I think it's just important that that is, clear. But if it's significant, then, you're taking that then to another level. You still have your processes to go through, but you're talking with the legal counsel, I think, at a minimum, just to get some guidance and talk about next steps. You don't want to overstep with a punishment or anything like that, but you want to make sure you're doing the right thing and you're not putting your district, your positions, and your community and kids in a really bad spot in any way. So that is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fueling. What I'd like to do is thank you for participating in the interview today. It's been very insightful, provided us a lot of information that we needed to know. Normally, we'd ask if you had any questions, but we're out of time, unfortunately. We appreciate your candor. We'll make a decision here before February 2nd or on February 2nd. We'll be meeting again to make a decision. And the video of the interview will be posted on the website for everybody to see. And a link will be provided for our committee members to leave comments. And then we'll be taking all those comments into consideration as we make our decision. And then either Dr. Oliver from NASB or I will be contacting each candidate after that. So we appreciate your participating in this interview today and your interest in serving as the superintendent of the Carson City School District. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
I think, Laurel, just, we have roughly 30 minutes now to, yeah.
At this time, we'll be in recess until the next interview at 10 o'clock. Thank you. Now, 10 o'clock on April 25th, 2022, we'll call the special session of the school board back into session. And we're waiting for Mr. Goldhart, who is our next candidate. Is he up? Okay. Good morning, how you doing?
Can you hear me? Great.
Yeah, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can.
All right, good, good. Just on behalf of the board, I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Richard Varner. I'm president of the Board of Trustees. And on behalf of the board, I want to thank you for your interest in serving as the superintendent of the Carson City School District. It is not only our vision, but our purpose to inspire and empower innovators, leaders, and thinkers by providing a quality education to all our students. And we are pleased to have you today so that we may get to know you. And I'll go ahead and introduce our board members now. To my immediate right is Mrs. Laurel Crossman.
Good morning.
Next to her is Mr. Mike Walker.
Good morning, nice to meet you.
To my immediate left is Mrs. Lupe Ramirez.
Good morning.
Next to her is Mr. Joe Cassiopo.
Good morning.
And then we have Mr. Don Carini.
Good afternoon, probably where you are.
It is afternoon here, but morning for you.
Good afternoon. What I'd like to do now is just briefly explain the interview process. The interviews will last approximately 70 to 90 minutes, 75 minutes to 90 minutes. And this would include a period of time for you to ask us questions. The board has chosen 10 questions to ask you. Each trustee, including myself, will take time asking you questions. As you're responding, please don't think we're being rude if our head happens to be down at the time. We will be taking notes, but we will be listening to you intently. We have received the packet of information that you submitted as requested, and we thank you for that. It'll help us get to know you better. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And then what I'd like to do at this time is just ask you to briefly introduce yourself and let us know what interested you in becoming or applying to be the superintendent of the Carson City School District.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I would just note for the record that the interview will end at 11:30, regardless of whether all the questions have been asked.
Yes, we have a hard time break at 11:30, so, and we will, as we go along the process, Mrs. Crossman will give you an update on the time of how much time you've spent. So please introduce yourself.
Well, good morning to you in Carson City. My name is John Goldhart. I am a husband first to my wife, Roma. We've been married for 33 years. She is also an educator. She describes herself as a recovering special education teacher. She is also a former reading specialist and reading coach. So we are an educator family and love that opportunity to be an educator family. We're the parents of 2 adult sons. Our oldest son and his wife just had their very first child and our very first grandchild. Our son is currently attending Ensign College, pursuing his bachelor's degree, and then is going to pursue a Master of Social Work degree and would like to become a social worker and therapist working with individuals with autism is what he would like to do. Our youngest son, this past summer, returned from serving as a missionary for our faith in Montana and is currently a student at Utah State University, where he's pursuing a degree in aviation. And his dream is to become a commercial pilot. So that's our family. I'm currently in my 33rd year as an educator. It doesn't feel that long to me. And I feel like I bring a great depth of experiences at various levels. However, that experience means absolutely nothing if I haven't learned from those experiences to become both a better person and a better leader. So each and every experience I've had the privilege of serving in this great education business I'm in, has added another layer of growth, another layer of opportunity to be better. And both the good and the bad have improved me and have made me a better leader. I will admit, probably the most difficult of the 33 years has been serving as a superintendent during COVID-19 and the pandemic, and in a highly political community and a district with 15 board members where the mayor is also the chair, and at the same time, everywhere in the country where there's a lot of anger, a lot of undermining, a lot of difficulties. However, through that, our leadership team was able to accomplish a great deal, and that made me better. And I've learned and grown from that to be a better leader and a better person. The question, though, is why would I come to Carson City? As I mentioned in my letter, Carson City is a great family community. I've been to Carson City multiple times in my lifetime and have always loved the community. My plan was to stay where I am for at least 5 years or even longer. However, there comes a time where you have to take a deep look inward and focus on what really matters most to you as an individual. And the birth of my granddaughter had a great change for me. And along with the pandemic, I had some changes in what I thought was important and what I didn't realize was important. And it changed my perspective. I needed to be closer, again, to my family, and I needed to be back in the West. I am a Westerner. I believe in Western values, especially the Western values of hard work, respect, and responsibility. But even more important, Carson City has the perfect setup for a school district. It is just the right size. With just about 7,000 students, it's large enough to provide excellent programming and services, but small enough to be personal, where you know one another, a sense of family, a sense of a team and working together. And with one main high school, and of course another high school to service students with other needs, there's one feeder system where all of our schools and all of the individuals working in our schools are engaging parents and families and aligning curriculum to meet the needs of our students to be successful in the 21st century. And the other part that was really appealing is there's a strong tradition in your district of a really positive and effective relationship between the Board of Trustees and the Superintendent, where you collaborate well together on behalf of students. Doesn't mean it's always Pollyanna, but there's a real collaborative culture. And when that happens, you're able to get a lot more done on behalf of students. And that's what I'm about, is getting things done on behalf of students. I'm looking for some place where something that some people would call small, like Carson City, so I can focus on what matters most, students and community engagement. Those matter to me a lot. Some tell me it's a step down to go from a larger district to a smaller district, but I personally believe it is a step up from my perspective, because my passion is about helping every student, and I emphasize every student, have a high quality education and that prepares every single one of those students for college or career, and to be effective citizens, and to have meaningful life skills that will help them to be successful. And that every one of our high school graduates, after they walk across that stage at graduation, have options for their future, and that they should be able to pursue the dreams of their choice. That is what makes a success for us. public education has been and will continue to be, when done effectively, a great equalizer for our society. I don't consider it a vocation. I consider it an avocation. I also strongly believe that a strong public education system is essential to our form of government and to preserving our nation, to have good citizens. And I believe that together we can build upon and honor the great accomplishments of the past, and that then we can together make that a brighter future for our students. To me, Carson City would be, as the music folks would call it, the crescendo of one's career. Perfect size district, supportive community, and students that love their schools. It's a perfect fit and a place that I would love to be a part of. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a very insightful introduction. I appreciate it. And we'll go ahead and now begin with our first question, which will be asked by Mr. Mike Walker.
Good morning, Mr. Goldhart. What would your priorities be for the first 90 days in the district?
Well, I provided you an entry plan, but one of the top priorities for me would be to start listening. Because I think one of the worst things a new leader can do in a district is come with an arrogant attitude and say, I have come with all the answers, and here's what we're going to do. That is wrong, because you need to honor the work that's been done in a district. I need to learn about the work that's been done in a district, and you need to get to know the people in the district. So my first 90 days, I'm going to be doing a lot of listening and learning. I'm going to meet with board members one-on-one. I'm going to meet with local community members one-on-one, students, teachers, principals, custodians, bus drivers, as many people in the community I can get to. When I came to this particular community, in my first 90 days, I met with over 300 people. And it gave me the opportunity to truly understand the perspectives of the individuals and what their feelings were about the schools. And they gave me a better insight that I didn't know. Then I'm able to take that information and learn from it. And then I can share that with the Board of Trustees and say, here's what I've learned. And this is what I feel could help us as we now move forward to improve upon what we've done. And have we considered this or this? I have to build those relationships, but I also have to learn. The other group that's really important for me to get to know are state assemblymen, state senators, because you need to work with those individuals and befriend them and support them, but also so you can work with them. So you have supporters for your district and for your students with legislation. And then having community members, your Rotary clubs, your Kiwanis clubs, and your faith-based groups as well. It gives you more support as a community. And I gain a better understanding of where we can go to get help for students if there's other groups out there that can help us and support us. But the most important thing, as I said before, is giving me the true perspective, because I don't come to the district with this agenda where I'm saying, here is my agenda and I'm going to do this, this, and this. My only agenda is student success. But I first have to listen, I first have to learn, and then I can lead based upon that and align with the current strategic plan that's in place and work with the board and with the leaders so that we can continue to move forward effectively. And as I find things that say, hey, we could do this to improve, we could do this to improve, we can do so. So that's what I would do in my first 90 days. Still running the district, you're doing that at the same time. Listen, learn, lead.
Thank you, Mr. Goldhart. My question for you is community engagement and connectivity are vital for a school district. What will you do to ensure the stakeholders and members of the community feel ownership and value in the school district?
Excellent. The entry part is the first part of that. I've got to go out and meet them. They need to know who I am. And the second part of that is it's not just lip service, that our district involves them. We just don't say, come over and help with the bake sale, that we want you to be truly involved with the process. We have parents that are helping on various school committees. We have parents that we involve with initiatives in the school district. We have parents that are on committees when we're adopting new curriculum or new textbooks, so that we make sure we have those perspectives. That I am involving myself in community organizations that are important in the community, and that I'm visible with those folks and involved with those folks, and that we're inviting them to our schools, that they are welcome, that they know when they come that they can be not told, what are you doing here, but how can we help you and what can we do to help you be a part of us. I know that during the time I was a teacher education professor, I taught a class in family involvement. And the thing I told my future teachers all the time was, you're not just trying to get family involvement in name only. It's about true family involvement means that they're really involved with their students' school life. And some of our parents cannot come to the school every day and help out in the classroom, but that doesn't mean they're not involved, because you can get their involvement by being involved in their child's life and being involved in their education and being involved in their success, and that they know you are a partner in that success and that we're not an us and them. We are true partners where we reach out and work together in communicating with each other, in talking to each other, and in making sure the student is successful, because that's the bottom line. Territorialism has never been successful in schools. I've been in this business long enough where I've seen it over and over again. When we become territorial, it turns off the community, it turns off those that we serve, and it hurts our kids. So again, in getting that community engagement, we invite, we let them in, we ask, and we remind ourselves, our parents know more about our students than we do. And we have to always remember that, even when it's hard. They know them more. And so we need to ask them about the child and learn more about the child. We also need to find out what works for them in helping with the child's education. And then beyond that, community members coming in to help with children's education, for work-based experiences, for speakers in classrooms, for providing various materials to learn better science or social studies or so forth. There are so many assets in the community that can be done. We even started a partnership here with the Boy Scouts, where the local Boy Scout camp is never used other than in the summer. So I worked out a partnership with the Scouts that we could take our elementary schools to their camp so they could then do their science and botany class experiments and activities there by their little lake. That's not too far away. That's better for our students. And they liked it because they're letting their land be used instead of just sitting empty. So we have to build those partnerships. Boys and Girls Clubs, I don't know if there's one there, they are a great partner. YMCAs, other organizations, your business community, Chamber of Commerce. I've had the privilege of being on our board of directors for the Chamber here. They come forward and say, how can I help with your CTE program? We bring them in, line them up with the CTE program so we have more job-embedded experiences for our students, and also younger students so they can get an introduction. It's a win-win when we do that. I find it exciting to have those community partners and engagement. both in the community and with parents, it makes education better. And when we can do it right, it is masterful. And the children come out ahead where they have, that full partnership with the community. It helps with the curriculum because it's helping generate those pathways for kids in a direction that matter. You have more engaged parents, more engaged families, and you're helping your staff as well. So it's a win-win-win.
I have the next question here. Given the current climate regarding equity-based learning, CRT, COVID response, and political divisiveness, how will you lead the district to gain community and staff support while advancing the academic success of our students?
Well, first of all, with equity, there's a lot of misunderstanding about it. I don't think there is a school district in the country that I'm aware of that is actually teaching CRT, and it shouldn't be, as regard to what it really is. That is a college level, law school based approach to teaching individuals and is not meant to be taught to K-12 children. In regards to equity, the most important equity to me is academic equity. That is the most important and one that should be focused on. And by that, when I use that word all, are all of our students having access to high levels of learning, high level courses, and experiences that lead them to success after high school? Does our data show that if our students who are students of color or students from poverty, are they not graduating at a higher rate? Are they not taking AP classes or dual enrollment classes at a high of a rate? We've got to look at why. Our number of students getting Fs, do we disaggregate that? And we see the difference between gender, race and ethnicity, special ed, ELL, and so forth. We address that and find out why. And if there are systems in place to provide supports in a multi-tiered system of support to bring people up to help them succeed. That's the most important. For me, the greatest example I learned of that is in my current position when I came here and found out that the district still at this time was leveling students into 4 levels when they hit secondary education, and the bottom 2 levels weren't taught all of the content. And of course the scores would be lower and you're not getting the content. Then when I dug into the data deeper, found out that the majority of the students in the level 1, which is the lowest level courses, were students of color or students from poverty. And the far majority of the students in the level 4 classes were white and from upper class. That wasn't acceptable to me. And I have been working hard and got a policy passed, but it still isn't implemented because it is still highly controversial to get that work to have us so we can get the students taught all standards and still have honors classes. And still, we want more. We want to open the door to more. The other part with that is making sure our schools have a culture and climate that is welcoming to students, that we truly show care, that we truly welcome students, and we want them all to succeed. Now, in regards to COVID protocols, what I have found to be most effective is basing it upon a metric so that decisions are based upon that and not having to continue to either vote all the time or go through multiple sessions of anger. Where it's like, we're at this point where we have substantial, our metric says substantial, we do this. We're at minimal, it says we do this. And I know regardless, there will always be individuals who will not support it, and it will be difficult. But we try to make it as clear and as transparent as possible and provide as many mitigations as possible in our schools to protect students. Air quality, cleaning, temperature checks, hand washing, separation if necessary, masking if it's at that level, and remembering even those people who come in who are very angry, probably we have to remember they care about their students too. They're showing it in a different way, and we have to remember that we all have the same goal, and that's to help our students be successful. And sometimes we have to agree to disagree, but the bottom line is we all want to do something for our students. And trying to do that together is better, but sometimes it's not going to happen, unfortunately. But the COVID protocols have been hard. Unfortunately, I think this is going to be around a while. But the equity part has gotten really some interesting traction in the past year. But to me, again, the most important parts of that are academic equity. And then with COVID, it is making sure we have the mitigations for safety and that we're very clear in regards to what and why we're doing it. And then I'm a believer in having a metric to base our decisions on so that it makes it, tends to make it less political and less difficult to have continued votes and changes on it. Unless you change the metric, then that would require that.
Thank you.
Dr. Goldhart, I will be asking the next question. Describe effective methods you have used to ensure the safety and well-being of students and staff. Include how you've addressed diversity, equity, and inclusion in your district.
Okay. Safety, I'll give you an example from when I was a high school principal that comes to mind. We had a situation where we had 3 groups of students who were not getting along. And for the first time in years, our school was having fights that they had never seen before. And so what I did, I said, this is enough. And had the resource officer involved. I said, we just can't keep sitting people out of here all the time. It's not solving anything. So I brought them all in with their parents, and we had some conversations and went to a root cause analysis of what is the problem and wanted to know why the fighting was taking place. And found out the reason why the fighting was taking place was because of racial name calling that was not known in the building. And by addressing the root cause, we enhanced the safety of the school and also protected the dignity of other individuals, which was far more important to me to do than just keep suspending and kicking out people, although sometimes you have to have people go because of safety issues. But getting to the root cause is far more important if you can. So we set up new parameters of how we deal with issues of bullying and name calling and what were before considered small issues, we made into bigger issues as far as bringing in and having consequences and counseling and discussions with individuals because it prevented the bigger issues. And it kept the school safer. Now, in regards to the other part of your question, I have had the opportunity in multiple schools of bringing more students into at that place. The only way I can say it is a place at the table. And the first way you do that is by asking the hard questions. Who is learning? Who is not? Who is participating? Who is not? and why. When I was a middle school principal, we had great involvement on our PTSA. But I also had the largest number of Hispanic students, and I had a Native American reservation in my boundary, but we had no parents. So this isn't acceptable. So we reached out and said, come join us, we need your voice. They didn't know they could. The invitation opened the door, and then they came, and then more thereafter, and then just became a common occurrence after that. And it enhanced the parent group because now we had the perspectives of more families, and we had a better understanding of student issues, especially also when I had a community council as well. And just that simple invitation helped alleviate a lot of other issues that we had. Then I was in the Salt Lake City School District. We enacted a strong professional learning experience where we had all of our school leaders at the district and school levels go through a full year with a group out of, I believe it was Portland or Seattle, with courageous conversations, because we'd had multiple OCR complaints before I'd arrived. And so we're working at how do we address this problem. In order to do that, we've got to get to the hard part of the discussion and admitting and addressing. And it was a tough year. There's some people that did not want to discuss it, but we needed to. And we were able to solve some of the issues and address issues and help prevent issues by doing so. So first thing I would do coming to Carson City is I would want to look at the data. I would want to, during, of course, those first 90 days, the stories I hear and reaching out and finding out if there are issues for students in this area, that we find out where is it happening, why is it happening, what has been addressed, and then we can figure out how we can make it better. Because I believe everybody should come into a school and feel safe, both physically and emotionally. Schools should be the most inviting place anywhere, so that anybody who comes in feels safe, both on the outside and on the inside. And that's a lofty goal because it's not always the case, but it's something I believe in, and it's something I strive to do. Because I remember what it was like as a student myself when I was growing up in poverty and I wasn't the cool kid and I was the one being made fun of and getting beat up in the bathroom and nothing got done. So I get it. And I don't want other students to have to deal with that when they're in school. I don't want any student to feel uncomfortable, unsafe, unwanted, or uncared for, because schools are to be places where kids are cared for and that they know they can go and they have an advocate there. And they go there and they know that they can learn and grow and become something that they're not. That's what it did for me. It changed my life because of some special teachers. And I want to do the same. And I've been doing that for my career for others. Schools matter. And as a superintendent, I have to make sure that we would do that for our students in Carson City.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goldhart. Question 5, how will you meet the individual learning needs of every student to foster student achievement with a growth mindset? And how will you track and measure that?
The growth mindset is quite a concept. I've always liked it. I studied it quite a bit when I was teaching my students the Carol Dweck approach, and it's true. The key to it, though, is the adults have to have the growth mindset first in a collective efficacy where when we believe our students are capable and we believe ourselves are capable, it changes the results with kids. Now, in regards to that individual part of a growth plan or a learning plan, I have come through the years to become a believer in a more competency-based approach to learning instead of a time-based approach. I never thought in my younger years that I'd ever come to that conclusion, but I have, because it is not only more equitable, but it is actually more rigorous. And those that aren't familiar with it, it's saying you are expected to master this competency, and you have to master the competency before you go to the next competency. It's not based upon time, it's based upon learning the competency. And so every student can be at a different level as far as where they are in the competencies within a course. And some students could finish quicker if they needed to and move on, but could be part of their own plan within that course. And each student inside your learning management system would have those competencies on there, and you would be keeping track of those so that you would know what those plans are. Now, of course, some of our students may have modifications or accommodations based upon an IEP, or they may have an accommodation because of a 504 accommodation, or there may be an ELL support for the student, and that's okay, because we're still learning the competencies, but just in a different way to accommodate the needs of the student. So one of our schools here started an approach that has been highly successful, where they have multi-age classrooms, where you may have students that are in the same classroom that are in 2 grades, but they're working on the same competencies together. And when the older student in that grade finishes those competencies, they go right over to the other classroom, and it's no big deal in the building. It's not looked at as this bad thing. And the kids have done better since going to this system, and they're learning more, and the data of their learning on other assessments has gone up. The attendance at the school has improved, and the behaviors at the school have improved, because the students are feeling more successful and the approach is more student-centered. The same school is now piloting a standards-based report card so that they can see how it works. They asked us if they could do it, and then they'll share with the rest of the district if it's successful or not. So there's an alignment with everything in regards to their learning. And it'll be fun to see how that works out with that part of things. But having that plan. But the other part of that is aligning it with a student's a comprehensive guidance approach with the counselors in having a college and career readiness plan, where in their secondary years in grades 6 through 12, where they're meeting with those guidance counselors at least yearly, with a parent preferably, and mapping out what they like to see in their future. And that can change with kids. And then when they're hitting 9th grade, they're aligning their coursework with their desired outcomes that they want to see happen. And I call them pathways, and elective classes should be aligned with your pathways, and your core classes, you're looking at ones that would be better with your pathway. And that's another part of that could be more individualized for students to be more successful, so that when they graduate, it is truly individualized for them in the pathway they want to pursue post-high school. And it can be pretty exciting. Does it take extra work? Yes. Is it worth it? Yes, because it's about the student, again, and helping them to be successful. So either a standards-based, competency-based approach, you can put those plans in learning management systems, marking off where they are along the way, and students can go at their pace and making it so there's no shaming, that they can be successful. We just want them to be successful in getting their standards met. That's what matters to us, is that they learn. And allowing the accommodations for students that need it, and at the same time, we have good comprehensive guidance for our 6 through 12 students in planning pathways for their future and looking at options and doing those online experiences where they can think about different career options and what does it require to do that career and what are they really interested and passionate in. They're experiencing different types of courses. And then they start to kind of hone in a little more with detailed courses, and it's just part of their CCR plan, College and Career Readiness Plan, for their future.
Okay, and just as for your information, because the president has asked me to keep track of time, we are halfway through the questions and we have about 50 minutes remaining in our 90-minute time frame. So my question for you is, how do you measure the roles, or how do you describe the roles of the superintendent and board? How do they work together? And the second part of that question is, how would you keep the board informed of developments in the district?
Thank you. The first part of the question, I asked Dr. Oliver to give you a visual that I really liked from one of my mentors, and it's the tennis court kind of visual that I got from Dr. Gorman, because I think it's very well done in regards to that superintendent and board relationship, where you have on the one side of the court, have the Board of Education, the policy. They set the policy for the district, they set the vision for the district, they set the mission for the district, the beliefs of the district. They also are part of the development of the strategic plan, a major part of the strategic plan. And then on the other side of the net, you have the staff superintendent side. They're implementing the strategic plan and implementing and making sure the vision and mission is being carried out in the district and that the policies set by the board are in place and happening. And they're accounting, and the superintendent's accounting to the board saying, yes, here's where we are with the strategic plan. Here's what's happening with that plan. This policy, is where we are here. This policy we ought to consider looking at, but the board has that ultimate choice. And in the net is what he called the theory of action. But I think the more important part of it is the vision part of that. We're the common vision of what we want our students to be. Some districts, it's a portrait of a graduate is that big piece. And in that going around with that ball back and forth, we're not in a win-lose, it's a win-win match because we are working together hand in hand for the betterment of students. We're the one side elected by the public to oversee, to set budgets, to set policy, to hire and evaluate a superintendent and make sure that the day-to-day operations of the district are being handled effectively and that the superintendent's accountable to that group. And then on the other side, you have a superintendent who's running the day-to-day affairs of the district, making sure that the strategic plan is taking place, that the vision of the district is center of all, and that that mission is part of us. It's part of what we do. And that the policies are taking place, but it's done together. You can't do it in isolation. And as far as working together and in communication with the board, in addition to board meeting, information, I believe in multiple ways of providing communication for the board. I like to have periodic one-on-one meetings with board members just so I can find out their particular constituencies may have different issues. Because my board is so large, I can only do it once a quarter, but in a smaller board, you could do it a lot more often. And it could even also be a quick phone call. A board report every week is what I've been doing. Any updates, any information that the board ought to know, they get. If I get an article that I think is good, I share it. If I get something that looks like something the board might like, that's an online webinar or something that's, optional, here you go. And then if there's any emergencies or issues that go on in the district, we immediately share those with the board. I think the board should know if a student's being taken in an ambulance. You ought to know. You just so you're aware of it. If you get called, you're aware. If there's a lockdown in the building, the board ought to be informed. If there are other issues, I believe the board should be informed. And so that would be shared with you. And if there's other ways that the board prefers, then I'd be open to that. The board I have has preferred email, but I think I've thought texting might be quicker, where you could give some of that information of a ambulance coming to a school, or there was a student that ran away from the school and they were found. You could text that and get it a lot quicker. But that's depending on the board's, preference, and I'm open to that. And then board reports, if there are certain parts that they prefer, they're a little different. But again, it's having that ongoing meeting. And with fewer members on a board, it would be really exciting to have ongoing conversations with all members of the board beyond the board meeting, where we'd have formals and even just quick calls, so we can stay in touch and we're always together. And then I also like to invite board members to school events, so you're always aware of them and that you're welcome. Because I know board members enjoy it, and especially if they're in your districts. The board superintendent relationship part, though, I think is vital. And up front, having some time to get together and talking about what's worked really well with you and some things you would like to see get better or that you want me to try, I think it would be a great experience for us, and I would respect that and would want to work with you as a partner, because we are partners.
Thank you. How do you determine if professional development provided by the district is improving student learning and teacher administration performance and morale?
Every professional development that you run, you should always do a detailed survey, not just did you like the professional development, but finding out what will you use from this experience. And then after some time, you do something else where you find out what was implemented. And you do that through your schools, through your curriculum specialists, your PD specialists, and then you look at the data. So for example, if we're having PD on, I'm thinking of one we're doing right now, on the new reading program, you can compare your former data before the PD and before the reading program, and then start looking at how well the students are doing on those formative assessments after each PD, and if you're seeing an improvement or not. And then getting feedback from teachers about what in the PD helped them and what in the PD didn't help them. And generally, you're going to get consistent feedback with the themes that are consistent. And then you can adjust your professional learning so that it is more meaningful and providing the action part. Because professional learning is not effective unless it's having an impact upon student learning. So we have to measure both how the teachers did and then how the students are doing. It can be very complicated, but it's worth it so that we find out if the large investment made in professional learning is making an impact on our district. The other part with professional learning that I have found is if you don't have coaching in place, where you have instructional coaches in your buildings that are supporting what is in the professional learning, the likelihood of it being carried forward is pretty low. And so that's another part we want to look at to see if that's taking place and if that's been effective in helping our folks. And then putting that data together, saying, okay, we spent all this money on this PD and we're not seeing any improvement. in our student achievement? Is it because we didn't help implement it, or is it because the PD isn't aligned really well to what we want? And digging in there deeply, doing that deep dive and root cause analysis to find out. And then if you find out it's because we didn't provide the support after to help folks implement, then we could do that. If we find out the PD we're provided just isn't aligned to what we need, we say we shouldn't be doing it. That's a waste of money. It's a waste of time. And we find out what does work and can be effective. I have found in my career that some of the most effective professional development for teachers is job-embedded professional development, where the teachers are working together in designing and developing the work and helping one another and analyzing data, as well as the traditional PD of having those supports and the coaching added in, and can be highly effective in helping us succeed. It's been hard in our career, in our business, to add that coaching piece, especially in our secondary schools. And I'm a secondary guy, because I would have never allowed, I'm not going to have someone coach me and watch me teach. Only the principal can do that. But I've learned better through the years that is the greatest thing that could ever happen, a non-evaluative peer coming in and can help me get better. And by giving me true suggestions and ways to improve my practice from a peer who understands it better. Great. It's just helping me improve and having that alignment. So again, with professional development, number one, is it aligned to what we want the outcome to be? We look at the after with really good surveys to find out, not just did you like it, but the implementation. Then we also then look at if there is data after with learning, and that can include not just summative assessments, but it also can include other assessments. And then we also look at if that's really aligned or not in a deep dive. And if it's not, we don't do it. And then we use what will work. And then we focus more on job-embedded PD because the history of it is more effective. And we provide the best approach to PD is where we also include coaching. And we involve our staff when we're planning PD. It shouldn't be something we do to people. Should be something we do with our folks.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, I have the next question, and it is, faced with this significant change in revenue, increase or decrease, how would you approach budget development for the upcoming fiscal year, and share your experience with budgeting and deficit spending?
I've had both. So I'll start with the deficit. This past school year wasn't a good revenue year in the fiscal 22 budget. Revenues were down. A lot of that the year before was a great year. And then COVID impacts came and not good. Here in this state, the state aid is very, very low, and local property tax is the main revenue for schools. Where I know in Nevada, it's state-based is pretty much the revenue. But that can change based on the economy too. So we had to go through and prioritize what had the best impact on students and wouldn't hurt. Because we knew if there were some things that we had to eliminate, it would have a deleterious impact on our students. And so those were off the table. And then we'd look at others that wouldn't have as big of an impact or would have no impact, and those would be considered. Regardless, it's never easy. And you figure out ways. First, can you do it through attrition? And we were fortunate that we had a large number of retirees. So that helped a lot, where we could do that and not replace some people And that made a big dent in there. And then looked at other places where we're like, you know what, we've got some really small sizes here where we could combine some programming here. Kids will still get it, but we can save finances here. For me, the other thing I had to do that was not easy, but I was surprised it didn't become real controversial. I had to close a school. I had one elementary school that's 140 years old, disrepair, great community school, had been a wonderful school through the years. The building had not been well taken care of through the years and needed multi-million dollars repair that wasn't going to happen. We have a school less than a mile away that could accommodate the students. And so by closing that school alone would save us, you know, $500,000 or $600,000 a year minimum. And did so, had a very positive transition with that, where the students all moved together to the same school. So we did that as well. And then we also had to use, in the end, because our board did not want to have as many cuts in our teaching staff, that we would fill in with some of our CARES money for some of those positions. And then by an act of grace, the state had some surplus that they gave us, and we were able to fill that in, and it worked out. But again, that process on a deficit, you've got to go in and look at what really, really matters and what can we do better and more efficient, and then what can we live without, although we may really like it, but we can live without so that we don't hurt kids. And my big priority is to not hurt at the teaching level, so that classrooms aren't have the big, you know, the major impact of the cuts. It's hard. It's hard. You know, in a surplus year and those good years, those are hard too, because I've been used to not having much. And so you're like, what do I do? I've never had this kind of money before. And so you have to start saying, what can I do? And then you have to also think, this isn't going to last. I got to make sure that some of these things can't be permanent, because what happens when the revenues go down again and I have to stop this? That's always in the back of my mind. You know, this ESSER money's been great, but it's like, in 3 years, it's gone. So we can't make this permanent. And so when you have those surpluses, you also have to remember that in budgeting. But again, looking at what are the greatest needs. Our greatest needs right now, having more reading coaches, because we're seeing some issues with our young readers. Do we add more there? Do we have issues with high schools with credits? Do we need to add some sections of credit recovery support for students? Is that a better use of the money for the time we have it, so we can help students get to graduation like they should? Looking at those needs, and then the big one is, for all budgeting for me, is how is it aligned with the strategic plan? I believe budgeting should be aligned. And the reason we do strategic plans is so that you're getting something done, and our budget should align with those plans. And while we're doing that budgeting process, and if we're cutting things that are not going to help us get the strategic plan, but we're keeping things that aren't, we have to take a step back and say, is this the priority? Is this priority in the plan? Well, if it is, we shouldn't be cutting it. We should be looking at something else, because the plan is the priority. We've agreed upon that. And too many times we stray from that and go back to tradition in budgeting, where I think the plan should help drive a lot of the budgeting in both the deficit times and in the good times, so that we can achieve our goals. Because those plans aren't put together in a haphazard way. There's a lot of work and deep dives taking place to look at the needs of the district and the district's learners. And so that ought to be driving our work, including our budgets. So with deficits, that's what I do. In surpluses, you're thinking, remember, it's not going to be long-term, so you got to hit what's really important and align it with the strategic plan.
Thank you.
What experience do you have in advocating for public education at local, state, and at national levels?
I've been involved with working with local legislators. I think it's important for a superintendent to reach out with bills, both as far as laws and finances that will affect the school district. In fact, I think it's a really important role of a superintendent to be involved with. So in my current role, I have made testimony on bills. One in particular, this past session, was in regards to, they called it a freedom account, but it's a voucher bill that claimed it would not take much money from the state. And in the end, it's a lot more millions, and they said it would be in hundreds of thousands. And, you know, I got a lot of backlash from some folks for doing that, but I was advocating for my district. I am a superintendent of a district that has high poverty and high needs students, many of which will not use such monies, and other areas will that have access to some private education. And it won't help our students, a lot of them. And there's no accountability. Our students take state assessments. The students who get this money don't have to take that. There's no accountability. I also testified that maybe they should take the same tests so that you have accountability. That would be fair. I didn't go over very well. But nonetheless, I'm going to work on behalf of the district. I'm going to make phone calls. I'm going to talk to legislators. I'm going to write letters, and I'm going to participate in the process. Also, in my current role, our board sets a budget, but our board of aldermen is the one who actually approves the budget and sets the budget. So I'm actually working with 30 people to get the budget set, and it can be quite interesting when you have one board that says we got to do this, and the school board is a lot more accommodating and wanting the budget to go through, and then you have another group where it's a lot harder to get approval, and then there's also a tax cap law that says you can only have it at this level, and if they want to go over, they'll have to have a supermajority, and it is a very interesting process. If you say the word tax cap, it becomes this bad, not good thing. And so that has been quite a process. But I try to work with them, and the ones that I know we can get support with, and try to get things through. As far as the national level, this last year, I was able to get in communication with our 2 U.S. senators in regards to CARES Act support that they were very supportive of and helped us with. They were very receptive and excited to help us with that. And in my other districts I've worked in, I have done the same thing, where I've worked with our Congress people and have reached out always, even to the Senate level. I may not get the response I want, but I'm still going to advocate and involve myself. And when I was in Utah, the School Board Association and the Superintendent's Association have a joint partnership when they're working during the legislative session. And every Friday, they all go up together and work with legislators, which is very effective. But during the school year, we held a breakfast every quarter for all of our state reps and senators that were within the school district. And we had a really good turnout. And the purpose was to share our priorities, to share the current situations we were having, and to give our take on upcoming bills that were coming or that they were looking at during their interim meetings before the session. So by the time the session came, it was pretty clear where we stood and that we would hope they would support us in those areas. What's nice with Carson City District is you're right there at the Capitol, and you have the opportunity to interact with the assemblymen and senators and be highly involved. And I don't know what kind of involvement the superintendents and the School Boards Association have, at what level there. I would welcome it, and I want to be a part of it. And I've done it before, and I want to continue to do that because we have to advocate. We have to involve ourselves and have to be in a position where we can work with people even when they disagree with us, and maybe next time they won't. And that we keep a positive relationship with folks, knowing that even though we disagree, we're not disagreeable, and that we can carry this message to be an ambassador for the district of trying to work for student success. The Nevada legislature will be much easier because here in New Hampshire, there's like over 400, nearly 400 in the state house. It's huge. And in my district, there's like nearly 30 plus legislators that live in the boundary. And so that's a whole different thing for me. It's they're much smaller districts with a much larger body. But where you have fewer, you're able to get a lot more one-on-one contact and do that work for the district. I'm in favor of it. I like doing it, and I would continue to do that. Be the district's ambassador as much as needed, or as it's something I would want to do, and I would hope that the board would like that to happen because I think it's important that the superintendent's involved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like I'm the caboose here with the last question before we turn it over to you for questions for us. So if there was an event of potential unethical behavior, how would you respond to allegations of this unethical behavior in our district?
Well, number one, I'd have to find out more about it. I have to get the full information. I like to get my facts, want to know what is true and what is not true. Is there hearsay or is it correct? If you find out there's unethical behavior taking place, you deal with it. Depending on the situation, you follow your procedures in place, you bring those individuals in, and you follow your consequences that are in place. But more importantly, you need to dig and see how far does it go. So for example, if there was unethical behavior in spending, that could go deeper in regards to, well, how did this happen in approvals, and why was this vendor chosen, in such a way? And you'd want to get all that information and have it addressed. If there are any legal ramifications, you bring in those folks. And of course, the board would be fully involved with that because it's a major situation. But I'm one that believes in acting quickly on those because education should be the most pure of places. And if we're having unethical, inappropriate behavior, then it should be dealt with quickly. And if we know these individuals are doing it, even in some cases, we may have to put them out on leave immediately, on a paid leave, so we can do a true investigation to make sure we have all the information. Even though we may not want to, we need to, or we won't have a good investigation. And if we have to let people go or do pretty serious discipline, so be it, because we cannot have that type of behavior. I think one of the most difficult things I ever had to do is when I was a principal and my assistant principal was in a situation where he was using students to set up time so he could meet their mothers he was having affairs with their mothers and was using the students as the conduit to meet them. And when we were able to get that finalized, we had to swiftly address it, and it wasn't pleasant, but we had to do it. And there were people in my building that weren't happy with me because he was a well-liked person. I liked him a lot. But we can't have that. It's not acceptable. It's not acceptable behavior in our school system. And I had some teachers on the staff who were just extremely angry, and I just had to let them know this is a personnel situation. I'm not giving you any more information. He will not be back here, and we need to let it alone. You need to give him his privacy, and we need to let who will be coming in here do their job and just move on, because you can't give those details, and we shouldn't. But we have to do it. We have to take care of it. We have to address it, and the board should be involved. And if there are false accusations, by doing the investigation, we find out if it is true. I would hope we don't have those, but unfortunately, in my years in my career, I have had to address them. And none of them so far have been enjoyable, but all of them, in the actions I've taken, I have not regretted it, because it has protected not only the integrity of the system, but it has protected people in the system and protected students. And we have to protect our students first and foremost, protect the people who we're working with, and we have to protect the integrity of this great institution. And we cannot have misdeeds and unethical behavior or misdeeds that hurt the profession or hurt others. It's just not acceptable.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goldhart. This has been insightful for all of us and has given, I think, us a good view into your leadership abilities and philosophies of education, so thank you. I'd like to give you the opportunity now. You have a few minutes here. If you have any questions for us.
My first one would be, what would be the one thing the new superintendent has to do in order to be successful in Carson City?
Thank you. I think it's tough to say one thing, but in my personal opinion, I think you hit on it. You have to understand the district, understand what's working and what isn't, and meet with our key stakeholders, everybody at all levels, the operations staff, custodians, teachers, parapros, all the way up the chain, to understand what's working at each school within the district. I think there's in all cases, no one size fits all. So an understanding of the district, I think, is key.
Thank you.
And I would add on to that, and I would also say have some courage to examine what we're doing and have some suggestions for what we could do better. We've had a set system for a very long time, and some new ideas might be warranted. And so I don't think that we necessarily want somebody to come in and just see what we do and continue. I think we want a leader that is truly here to lead. And, that's going to take stakeholders, board input. It's a big job, but I think that I think it's well-rounded is what we want.
Thank you.
Any other board comments? Seeing none, I agree with what the two speakers before me said. But do you have any other questions?
Yeah, if you had like a board magic wand and you could wave it and make one thing happen in the district that would really help, what would it be?
Improve the statewide per pupil funding.
I like that one.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
We're talking magic wand, so, you know.
Yes.
And also, if I could do anything, I'd erase poverty. And that would eliminate a lot of the achievement gaps that some of our students experience and would truly balance the playing field for all kids, which is what each and every one of us advocates for. And I know our teachers and staff members advocate for, and, you know, and I know parents at home are worried about that also. So, you know, poverty would be a great thing to eliminate.
And I would maybe add to that, I agree with those, certainly. My magic wand might be a little closer to the ground, just in what we're experiencing. Certainly finances and financial situations are very important. But I look at how do we ensure the students are getting the best education they can from our district? How do we improve the academics while at the same time being careful about staff burnout, because that's a real thing, and also satisfying the needs of the community? These things don't always align and come together in a perfect storm. So, you know, I think sometimes it does take a magic wand to achieve all that.
Thank you.
Very good questions so far. Do you have any others?
Yeah, another one would be, what are the things you're the most proud of about the district?
I'll take a shot at that. I'm very proud of our staff, our teachers. They've worked very hard through this pandemic. We've had remote learning they've had to adopt to in a year or so ago, and they had to do it quickly. Then we had a hybrid system where we had some remote and some in class, and the teachers and the staff and other individuals had to adapt to that. And so I'm really proud of our staff and our teachers, because I think under the circumstances, they've done a very good job.
Thank you. That's great.
And I may add to that also, I'm very proud of our administrative staff. You know, I don't want to forget them, because they've had to deal with a lot of different issues. And I think overall, it's been handled very well. And the board members, I think, have been very involved in this process. And so I think the community should be proud of our board members.
Yeah, maybe I'll add to that. I agree. I mean, I'm proud of the district we have and really the community we have. This is why I moved here, quite frankly, almost 30 years ago, is it's a community you can get involved in. And I've been able to get involved in the school board and the planning commission, other things like that throughout the years. Our community members who are coming to our school board meetings lately, they have serious concerns and valid concerns in many cases, and they're able to come to the boards. And while we find we can't resolve all the issues, it's an avenue and an ability for folks to come together, express concerns, express ideas, and, you know, find ways to keep our community moving in the right direction. And I think we have the right, you know, the teachers and staff, our students. I look at our students, and I have the benefit of having 3 kids now that all graduated from this district, and I watch how they and their friends have moved on to achieve other goals in their life, academically or otherwise. And I just see a lot of successes coming from this. And I'd be remiss not to point out our current superintendent, who has the longest tenure of any superintendent in our state at 14 years. And so I think, you know, he has big shoes to fill, and he's done a great job for us. And again, we're not perfect, but we work hard to try to keep moving in the right direction. And that's what I'm proud of.
You still have a little bit of time left. Do you have any further questions?
I think my final question would be is, how do you intend to hold, or how do you hold the superintendent accountable for, you know, leading the district, goals for the district, meeting your collective expectations?
We annually evaluate the superintendent, and I think that would be where we hold him accountable for those through an annual evaluation.
And I would, go ahead, Mike.
Well, and I was just going to say, in addition to that, I consider us truly to be a high-functioning governing team, and that includes our superintendent. And so there are goals that we set, and then we're continuously having those discussions and working together. And so I wouldn't say it's a relationship like we're sitting here with our clipboards waiting for a mistake to happen and ready to respond. It's more like we've hit a lot of bumps in the road the last couple of years, like all districts, and together we've found ways to navigate around those potholes and keep the ship moving forward. And I think that's a testament to commitment to the district and these students.
And also, I'll add, we, like Trustee Crossman said, we do annual evaluations, but even before that, we have a strategic plan that years ago we worked hard to put in place, and we recognize it has to be updated. And lately, we're talking about more measurable outcomes we want, from it. And so when we look at what the superintendent's doing, we're looking at the strategic plan. We're getting reports on academic progress from students. We're hearing about the social emotional portion of learning. And in a lot of cases for us as trustees, for me as a trustee, some of this stuff is newer because I come from the private sector doing something totally different. And so I've learned over these 9 years how districts operate, and that's allowed me to hold the superintendent in one sense accountable, but also work with him to make sure that we're not just looking, like Trustee Walker said, we're just not looking for the bad, but we're working together to achieve the good.
Thank you.
Any other questions, or are you ready to wrap it up?
No, I'm good. Thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you, and we appreciate your candor today. I think you've been very candid about everything. It was very insightful, your interview. And I want to let you know that we'll be making our decision about our next steps on February 2nd. The video of this interview will be posted online on our website, and a link will be provided for our community to leave comments. We will be taking all of those comments into consideration as we move forward. Then Dr. Oliver or myself will be reaching out to you after the February 2nd meeting. And once again, I'd just like to thank you for your candor today. Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
And I hope you have a wonderful day.
You too.
Mr. President,
Yes,
are you going to formally call a recess?
I'm sorry. Yes, I am. At this time, we'll be in recess at 11:24, and then we will call the order, I can't even talk right now. We'll call the meeting back to order at 1:30.
The recording has